They say it is only a nursery rhyme about an egg that falls and breaks, but the lines that shape your memory are older, stranger, and more unsettling than the tidy picture in the book. 4 short beats, a seat on a wall, a fall. Many hands that try to fix what broke and fail. For most readers today, the figure is a smiling egg in a striped suit. For the first listeners, it was a ruined person and a hard lesson about things that cannot be repaired. Tonight we walk back through old chapbooks, tavern slang, and parliamentary jokes to see what the earliest pages actually say. How the famous line with the king arrived. Why the canon and fallen king stories do not hold up, and why the rhyme endures even when the details change. If you like careful deep dives that strip a familiar story to its bones and rebuild it with receipts, hit subscribe and stay until the end so you don't miss the parts most retellings skip. Most people picture Humpty Dumpty as an egg because many 19th century printers filed the verse as a riddle and then drew the answer next to it. You can see this in small anthologies that presented a page of short puzzles with bracketed solutions. What sits on a wall has a great fall and cannot be put back together again. The answer they printed was an egg. Illustrators leaned into the hint and began to draw a human-shaped egg on a wall, so a child could guess without reading the key. Later, Lewis Carroll turned the egg into a speaking character who argues about words. That run of images hardened the link in the public mind. It feels obvious because the logic is simple. An egg that falls breaks. When it breaks, you do not mend it. But if you step back to the first printed witnesses, the tone is colder and more adult. In 1897, a small London book for children titled Juvenile Amusements printed a 4-line verse. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. 80 men and 80 more could not set Humpty Dumpty as he was before. No king, no horses, no shell. The scene is not a court, it is a crowd that tries and fails. In 1810, Gammer Gurton's Garland printed a very similar quatrain and framed it as a riddle in a list. Again, the effort is collective. Again, the failure is final. The punchline is the same each time. Some breaks do not mend, no matter how many hands you bring. The blunt idea matched another live meaning of the words that listeners already knew. In late 17th century England, a Humpty Dumpty could be a person and a drink. The Oxford English Dictionary records the noun as slang for a short, dumpy, or clumsy person. It also records a hot mix of ale and brandy sold in taverns under that name. The drink left the men red-faced and bent over, and then dumped in the street. Hump for the posture, dump for the collapse. The word tied a shape to a fall and a fall to a cause. Put that ear next to the rhyme, and the picture is not an egg at all. It is a man on a low wall outside an alehouse. Neighbors try to prop him. They cannot set him as he was before because the damage is inside and old. The famous royal line enters later. During the 1810s, printers and speakers began to swap the crowd for the king's resources. All the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty Dumpty together again. Members of Parliament even used the line in debate as a neat way to say that state power could not fix a policy that had failed. You can read a report of a floor speech that lifted the nursery lines to talk about the ruin of British fortunes inside India. The point landed because everyone in the room knew the riddle. It was a clean way to say that money, men, and authority cannot undo some breaks. A later printer made the jab sharper by swapping horses for money and saying that not all the king's money and not all the king's men could mend the thing. From that decade on, the royal phrasing gained ground because it was more useful to satirists and to newspapers, and because it adds a stronger rhythm. It is catchy. It also became the hook that later allowed writers to paste the verse onto famous events. That pasting is how we got the canon story. You will often hear that Humpty Dumpty was the name of a large royalist gun that sat on the wall of a church at Colchester during the 1648 siege. A parliamentary shot breaks the wall. The gun falls. The crew cannot raise it. All the king's horses and all the king's men cannot put it up again. It is a tight story with good color. It fails the date test. The royal line that the story needs does not appear in print until the 1810s. The siege took place in the 1640s. Local historians who went through parish books, military letters, and town records found no period link between the rhyme and the town. The tale looks like a late 20th century attempt to hang a small verse on a dramatic episode to draw visitors. In the version that blames Richard III for the fall also fails the same test. The king died at Bosworth in 1485. The first printed rhyme is more than 300 years later. There is no trail in between. So the early paper trail is short and plain. A verse about a fall and a failure to repair. A word that already evoked broken bodies and drink. A political turn a decade or two later that brought in the king and made the couplet bite. Then a long run of printers who present the lines as a riddle and answer it with an egg. The egg image endures because it is clean and true to the logic. It explains the rule to a child without gore. It also gave artists a simple body to draw. That is why most readers think in shells rather than in flesh. The rhyme's core is not about a throne or a gun. It is about irreversibility. That is why it travels well. Danish and German children recite cousins where a round figure falls and cannot be mended. Some of those cousins are darker in detail. A boy tumbles and splits. A parish kneels and prays, but cannot undo what gravity has done. The English verse is less graphic, but the law is the same. A point of no return has been crossed. You can gather men, you can spend money. You can bring horses, surgeons, and carpenters. It doesn't matter. The thing will not be as it was before. Because the law is so clear, the lines are easy to borrow. Politicians use them to point at policy failures. Editorial writers use them to title columns about projects that cannot be salvaged. Scholars use them to talk about cracked systems and broken norms. Doctors reach for them when they describe tissue that cannot be repaired. Engineers use them when they talk about brittle fracture. The neatness is part of the risk. A neat line tempts people to glue it to any old story. That is how a verse about a tavern wreck and a riddle became a canon, a siege, a king, a battle, or a fall from a horse. None of those extra stories comes from early point. Each is a layer laid on top by someone with a reason to make the rhyme carry more weight than it had. That does not mean the egg is wrong or shallow. The egg is honest because it holds the rule without spin. It keeps the focus on choice and risk. The wall is a narrow place. The object is not built for impact. The rhyme does not scold. It does not tell you where to sit. It shows what happens if you choose a place where one slip ends the game. In that sense, the few words are not a moral in the usual sense. They are a map of a boundary. Cross it, and you do not get a second try. There is also a human pattern that sits behind the fall and gives the verse its sting. People often act as if repair is guaranteed. They assume there will be time to fix it. They assume there will be help. They assume resources will be enough. The riddle says so. Some breaks, the riddle says no. Some breaks are final. You do not buy them back with force, money, or friends. You avoid them by choosing your ground with care. That is a simple lesson. It is also a hard one. It is why the rhyme sits in the head the way a nail sits in a beam. The later print culture added polish and made the edges round. You can see that smoothing across many nursery anthologies. Printers stack the verse with other gentle pieces and draw a friendly egg body with a smile. The tone shifts from adult limits to child puzzle. This is what a picture book needs. It is also how many readers learned the piece. That shift made a gap that folklore writers later tried to fill with color and hurt. That is where the canon and the battle and the king come from. There are attempts to give the lines a story that matches the weight they feel. When you pull the rhyme apart and set the pieces next to their dates, what remains is still strong. The short line from 1797 that represents a fall and a failure to repair. The 1810 riddle that invited the egg. The 1810's habit of turning the crowd into the king's men and horses to make a political point about state limits. The longer Victorian tradition of drawing the egg and making the verse safe for parlors and schools. the modern habit of spinning new backstories for publicity or local pride. None of that kills the core. The rhythm survives because it speaks to loss without ornament. That is also why the rhyme can still make a point today without the shell. It can talk about a reputation you cannot mend. It can talk about trust you cannot rebuild after the wrong act. It can talk about a river system that cannot return to its old flow once a dam is in and silt is in place. It can talk about a body after a stroke. It can talk about a file you forgot to back up. It can even talk about a policy that passed a threshold and will not return to the old norm. You do not need to preach. You only need to say the couplet, and everyone in the room understands that the floor dropped away. This is the part of the story that makes the egg and the man meet. The tavern sense and the riddle sense are not at war. They are the same lesson pointed at different examples. The drunk on the wall cannot be said as he was before. The egg on the wall cannot be said as it was before. The two images share the same hinge. Time and damage can cross a line that effort cannot uncross. That is what the verse keeps telling. That is why a child can sing it without fear, and an adult can quote it without a wince. So where does this leave the myths that people keep repeating? They are easy to set aside once you hold the dates in your hand. The Siege of Colchester is a strong story with good detail. It appears more than a century and a half before the royal line shows up in print. The Richard III tie is neat, but has no paper trail. The idea that it was a siege engine at Gloucester is a guess dressed in fact. You do not need any of them for the rhyme to work. The verse is not a code. It is a tool that people kept using and repainting to suit the day. If you learned this piece as a smiling egg in a blue jacket, that is fine. The egg is a clean teacher. It is also only one phase of the story. Before the shell, there was a bent body and a hot drink with a cruel name. Before the king's men, there were neighbors who could lift but not repair. Before the cannon, there was a room of lawmakers who needed a short way to say that power could not fix the mess it made. These lines carry all of that and still sit in a child's book because they are short, strong, and true. If this changed how you hear those 4 lines, like the video, share it with someone who grew up on the same rhyme, and subscribe so the next hidden history finds you first.